Well, welcome everyone. We are super excited to have you here with us today. We are going to be talking about some fun stuff with Teams and specifically how to connect web services that you may have into Teams. And we'll talk about some different options there. So my name is Dan Wallin. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and I have my esteemed colleague, Bob German, with me. Bob, introduce yourself.
Oh, hello. Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Bob German, alias Captain Webhook. Arr! Here to tell about connectors and webhooks today. We're really excited to be here at Build and also to welcome you all from around the world. It looks like we've got Kevin from San Francisco, Yana from Warsaw, Brent from Austin. We've got Michael in Oklahoma City. I saw some others come across and they're disappearing off the screen, but somebody I think was in Tokyo or in Japan. So really exciting to have such kind of global coverage here. And I hope you really enjoy the presentation.
Absolutely. So as we're going through, folks, the Learn module we're going to cover, as you can see here, connect web services to Microsoft Teams with webhooks and connectors. You can go to aka.ms/CON066, and we'll show this again later. This will be something that after we get done, if you'd like to go through it on your own, then you can certainly do that. So with that, Bob, why don't we talk about what we're going to build, and then we'll jump right in. Sound good?
Yeah, let's show them.
All right. So we're going to start off with discussing how a user could actually, right from Teams, call out to a web service. And we're going to use an outgoing webhook to do this. Here's an example here. We're going to get some planet details. And then from there, we'll do the opposite. So, Bob, I'll let you take the next part here.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to often you're going to want to send indications and messages and notifications into a team. And it turns out you can do that by just sending a single HTTP request. As you see right here, we're sending in this planet information, an update on planet Pluto, obviously, or proto-pseudo-planet. And then we'll show you how to take that a step further and actually bring in something called a connector, which allows you to package your app up as a Teams application, put it in the Teams store, etc. And then people can come in and configure your connector. In this case, I want orange notifications to my connector. And then whenever an orange event happens, which I'll kick off by just quickly calling a web service using Postman, I'm just going to send that off. And you'll see that all of the people who have installed an orange configuration of the connector are going to get this message. So this is how you would send out stock notifications, inventory, whatever it might be.
Nice. So that's the general idea. So to kind of get the most out of this, the prereqs are that you have some experience with Microsoft Teams at kind of an intermediate level. We're going to be working with JavaScript, TypeScript, Node.js, but there are other technologies you could use for this, of course. And then we're going to be using VS Code. And of course, you would need a Microsoft 365 tenant because that's what we're going to be working in as we load up Teams. So, Bob, do you want to walk us through the learning objectives real quick, and then we'll jump right in here.
All right, mateys, you're going to learn how to create and use an outgoing webhook. So what you saw Dan show just now, you're going to learn how to also use incoming webhooks, maybe one line of script to send a notification into a team and let people know. And then we'll show you how to build the full connector that actually installs as a Teams application.
Exactly. So you basically just saw all that, but now we're going to start to walk you through. Now, a bunch of you are already in and have already said where you're from and all those types of things. So feel free to, if you just are joining us, say hi, ask questions in the chat. We have a very distinguished guest who will be answering a lot of those questions. Victor's in there, who is behind Yo Teams.
Actually,
right,
yeah, he wrote Yo Teams, and he's. I was thrilled to have him answering questions. It's like having Henry Ford fix your car. It's like, oh my god,
exactly.
We get the guy who wrote the thing. Oh wow, that's cool.
Or in your case, Captain Hook, pirate your ship. I guess I don't know.
Yes.
All right, well, let's jump on in, and we're going to do a real kind of 10,000-foot level look at what we're going to cover, and then we'll jump into our first area. So first off, we talked about these things called web hooks, and that's why Bob has a pretty cool little hat and those type of things going. And basically, you have two types of webhooks. You can do outgoing, where the user can actually type something, call out to your service and then get data. Or as Bob talked about, you can actually push data into Teams from an external program. Now, we're also going to talk about how you can package that up and make it a little bit easier for users to work with, and that'll be connectors, which we'll get to towards the end of the presentation today. So from a high level, the way this will work then is with outgoing web hooks. You're going to have Teams. As you saw, the user can then type something. Now, they're going to mention the actual webhook. That will then call out to the web service and then has about 5 seconds. It can return data. So that's the general idea is we're going to post a message and then get some data back. Now, when it comes to incoming, as Bob kind of showed, we did it with Postman, but imagine you have an application that an invoice came in, or we have a payment we need to make, or an order came in. Well, that app can actually push that into Teams. So it's actually very, very useful for a variety of scenarios. And then finally, you can do a very similar thing, but in a little more formal manner with connectors. And so we'll look at that as well. So to kind of sum up, this session is all about getting data in and out of Teams with webhooks and connectors, and basically proactively either allowing the users to get data in to Teams or sending data from an external application into Teams. And that's kind of what we're after. So with that, I'm going to let Bob walk us through our first section, and then we'll do a demonstration here.
Perfect. So let me just grab the screen here. And so, yeah, outgoing webhooks, I mean, just kind of the way these work is it, as Dan said, it's a great way for Teams users to send messages out to your external app. It's not the same as a bot. It's not as fancy as a bot. You're not going to have enough information to kind of have an ongoing conversation. But it is a great way to just quickly integrate an app into Teams. So as Dan pointed out, basically you're going to Teams outgoing is, by the way, from the perspective of Teams incoming. So if you think about it from Teams perspective, not from your program, the outgoing call is going to come from Teams and into your web service, and then you get to respond by responding to the HTTP post. So the way this actually works, it begins with a developer building a web service that can accept an incoming HTTP request. Then a person, and this is kind of a one-off thing, so it may not be a developer, it may not be, this is kind of installed on a team-by-team basis. So a person registers an outgoing webhook in a team, and they paste in the web service URL. Notice, by the way, that this is scoped at a team level, not at a channel level. So you'll find the incoming webhooks and the connectors are scoped on a per channel level, so the messages come into just one channel. Whereas the outgoing, that's installed for the whole team, so all the channels can use it. At that point, right there in the UI, Teams provides a security token that has to get put into the web service. Then whenever a user mentions the webhook, Teams will send so there's a security token, got to store that safely. Then when a user mentions the webhook, Teams sends a post to the app, and then the app uses that security token, and you better validate it or we'll make you walk the plank. Anyway, the app uses the security token to validate the message and respond with a success or a failure. So Dan, are you up for showing us how this works?
Well, we better. I don't want to walk the plank with you around,
I know, right?
So,
exactly.
Yeah, make sure when we get to the security token piece here, Bob, that I don't want to forget that, because
I know it could be taking a long walk off a short pier.
That's right. And I didn't bring my swimsuit today, so what are we going to do? All right. So if we jump into the actual exercise, this is the first one. You'll see some different units here, and we're going to be doing the creating outgoing webhooks. We'll be doing the incoming, and then we're going to jump to the connectors. Now, what we're going to do with this first one is let's take a really quick look at the prereqs. So this one uses Yo Teams. And so one of the big things we're going to be doing is scaffolding out the project. Now, I'm not going to do that part live, as you're going to see. I'll actually just play a quick video to show you that, because that can take a sec to install our NPM modules. But in addition to that, we have goal, you'll notice here. And then, of course, this is all driven by Node.js. So kind of the big ones are YoTeams, our Yeoman generator itself, and then Gulp, and then, of course, Node.js to run this. Now, any editor could be used, but we're going to be using VS Code here. All right, so moving on down, Bob, when it comes to YoTeams, walk me through kind of what's the general, why would I use it? What are some of the things I can do there?
Well, Yeoman, Yo is for Yeoman, and it's a code generator. So what has happened is that some experts in Teams development, and mainly Victor, as far as I know, although he may have had some help, but he kind of put together a pattern for how a Teams app would be constructed that has all the different features that a Teams app could have. And then you fill in a little form with some questions, and it generates the beginning of your app for you. Scaffolding, as they say.
Exactly. So normally I would come over to a command prompt, and I have YoTeams installed. I would just type YoTeams, but let me go ahead and show you how that would work. Basically, the exercise is going to walk you through the specific data you need to provide. So I'll walk you through this. So you'll start off with YoTeams. That's going to then ask you a question. What's your solution name? All right, so we can go ahead and put that. Where do you want to place your files? Probably in the current folder, but if you had a different place, you can give some info there. Create a subfolder, for example. Once we do that, what's the title of your project? And so we can enter that. Your company, of course, we're going to go with Contoso because, what other company would you want to go with? But from there, you can choose your manifest. Now, right now, it's V1.8. Of course, that will change into the future, but that would be the default we'll select. Do you want to have quick scaffolding? Now, scaffolding is really what YoTeams is all about. It's going to generate code, scaffold code that you can use. And then notice here, I could select a tab app. I could do bots and outgoing webhooks. Now, what you do if you haven't done it before is you just hit the space bar and use the arrow keys. So I want to deselect a tab because we're not going to do that for this. So we can just hit the space bar there and then move on down and hit space again to select an outgoing webhook. And then finally, you can give what's the URL that's going to host this solution. We'll talk about that. And then a few other extra things like, do you want a loading indicator and what's the name of your outgoing webhook? Now, that will actually scaffold it out. It'll import all the NPM packages, install those on your machine. And that's why we're going to do a video here because that part can take a little bit of time. But that is how you would get going. And that is the first part of the exercise here. Now, the other thing we're going to do, and you'll see I've already scaffolded this out just to kind of make sure we don't have any issues with my network and other fun things that can happen with live presentations. But the other thing they're going to have you do is npm install Lodash. This is used just for some array manipulation. Technically, you don't really have to do it if you wanted to tweak the code, but that's what we have. So if I go to my package JSON, you're going to see all the packages that were installed, including Lodash right there. And then we're kind of ready to go here. All right, so Bob, I think the next part is it's scaffolded out some code for us. It looks like we have kind of a typical Node.js type setup, right?
Yeah, it's pretty standard. It's actually got, if you open up source, it's got a client and a server folder. And, I don't think we're using the client side for this particular exercise, but it's kind of all there, and you can actually run it again and add more features to your app if you want.
Exactly. So the next part of this is Bob and I are going to first explore a little more than they do in this exercise and kind of walk you through a little bit of the code. So they're going to have you open this file. It's a TypeScript file. You'll see it right here. And it's this Teams webhooks outgoing webhook.ts. And it's definitely very obvious what this does, Bob. It must be an outgoing webhook.
It must be.
Now, this particular code that you see here, you're going to notice that it actually generates a class. And then walk me through, Bob, what do we have going on right here, this little decorator?
Yeah, that's just routing. So it's gonna send anything that comes in on your hostname /API/webhook is going to go into this particular class.
Exactly.
Into the request
so you're going to see us use this. In just a little bit.
And it works right out of the box.
Walk
right?
through the start of this. So we have this class and it has a request handler, and this is using Express, by the way. Okay. Of course, there's other options you could do for your services, but this is what this one does. And in this request handler, when a user ultimately is from the team's perspective typing, that's going to call this. And then the request handler here has 5 seconds to return a response. So the first thing is we're going to return a message object, and we'll play with this in just a moment. But before we do that, Bob, you mentioned something earlier about walking the plank with security token, and do you want to kind of walk us through this code here real quick?
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is you've just opened up a web service to the entire internet. So what you don't want is people sending stuff that isn't from where it's supposed to come from Teams, right? So the way it works is that Teams will calculate a hash of your entire message, and then that somehow cryptographically includes that security token. And this code right here is calculating that same value. So if they don't match, that means that whoever sent the message wasn't Teams, or they didn't have the right token, or maybe the message was altered, so the hash value changed. So basically, you're just making sure, yeah, okay, this really did come from Microsoft Teams, and not only that, but from the team where I configured this particular webhook.
Exactly. And you're going to see us use this token here in just a moment, actually, and give us a little bit, and we'll come back to that. Now, if they do match, what's going to happen is we're going to return a message, and in the exercise, they kind of want you to locate that code. Well, that's right here. And all this does is literally echoes back what the user typed. Not very useful. So we're going to fix that. Now, if they didn't match, as Bob just mentioned, somebody hacked it or whatever, then we're just going to say, no, something's wrong, and we'll just return an error message there. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of it to start things off. So moving on down, the next thing they want us to do is add a couple files. Now, these files kind of have two things they're going to do. The first that you're going to see right here is just literally a JSON file with a list of planets. So there's nothing really special in this other than, hey, if you're really interested in learning about solar orbit years and stuff like that, that data is in here.
That's good to know.
But we're going to be using this as kind of our data source to return data back to the user. The other thing that we're going to add is a card file. And this is actually, we'll talk about it in just a bit, and as we get more to the code, this is actually how we're going to take data, merge it into this card so that when it shows up in Teams, it looks like a card. It looks really nice. And so we'll come to this in just a little bit as well. Now, in the interest of time, we have already added our planets. There's our planets right there. And we have already added in our display card. And you'll see that right here. So we're going to talk about what data gets merged into here as we move along, but that's kind of the general idea is we're going to have data, we're going to have a card, we want to merge the two and then send it. But now we need to add the code to do that. So the first thing that they want us to do is at the top of our service, they want us to import our Lodash code. All right, so we're going to be using that in a little bit later in a function. That's going to be used just to find the planet in the array. As mentioned earlier, technically you could do that without Lodash, but that's what this exercise has you do. The next thing is we need to be able to get that card file and load it up. That's going to be done with this planet display card JSON we just showed. So I'm going to just copy this guy, and we'll go in right to the bottom here. And we're going to add this in. And then before we move on, Bob, do you want to kind of just give us a high-level 10,000-foot view? What's going on here now that we've talked briefly about cards?
Yeah, so what's going on here is somehow the code has parsed out and figured out which planet has been asked about. And then it's going to create a card that talks about that planet with stitching in the information from basically taking two pieces of JSON and putting them together. Now, it's probably a good time to mention that the world keeps changing and these labs are actually getting updated. And the timing on this was such that the update actually is not quite there yet. So you'll see these getting updated. I don't know if they're going to update this or not, but since this lab was written, there is an easier way to do this, which is that the adaptive card SDK now has a templating service so that you could put, you could actually do data binding into the JSON of the adaptive card. So that would probably reduce this to maybe 1 or 2 lines of code. But this works fine. It's perfectly fine. It's just, it's just before they had that SDK, this is the way you would do it.
It's kind of the difference, Bob, of if I was to write vanilla JavaScript to actually update the DOM, the document object model in a web page, and do it all by hand versus using a library that can data bind. That's kind of the difference here.
Exactly. So
they both get the job.
By the way, we are getting a few questions. I'm just going to sneak in an answer here. Christoph wants to know if webhooks are limited to chat or if they can be hooked up to voice and respond to an audio capture. They are limited to chat. They're also actually limited to chat inside of Teams. And they also work, interestingly, the full connectors work in Outlook. So this technology has been around for a while before Teams even came along. So I would say it's not just text, though, because what you're seeing here is it could be something a lot richer than text, which is an adaptive card. And if you go to adaptivecards.io, you can learn all about those.
Yeah, I mean, you can even do Markdown and all kinds of fun stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. But the audio stuff is not part of this, fortunately.
Excellent question. Excellent question. Okay, Bob. Well, we have a way to take a planet and then kind of fit it into this card to ultimately return some data, but we obviously need to find the planet and then call this, and we have a little bit more to do. So the next thing we're going to add in the exercise is this process authenticated request. And now, why did they call it process authenticated request? Well, let's put it in first, and then we'll talk about it. Well, earlier, Bob walked us through that we're going to have this security token that we need to verify. If it's not authenticated, then obviously we don't want to process the request. So what's going to end up happening here is, assuming that's all good, we're going to get the incoming text. And then you'll see in just a little bit, we're actually going to kind of split apart what the user typed so that we can get the planet. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But the really big goal of this one is we need to load the planets and then filter based on this incoming text. So if Bob asked for Mars, we only want to show, Mars, of course. If Bob asked for planet Earth, we probably want to show Earth. So that's what this is going to do. And then we'll show you how we're going to kind of filter this incoming text here in just a little bit.
Nice.
But all we're going to do for now is, if we don't have a selected planet, we're just going to echo back what they typed. Otherwise, look at that, Bob. We're going to use this get planet detail card. And that's what you just covered.
Yeah. Perfect.
Perfect. Okay. So let's assume we have a planet. We're going to send them back a planet. So we're almost done with the code part. Now, the next thing is, you're going to see in Teams, as a user types, they're going to @mention. So you can type the character and say like planet details, for example. And then they put maybe Mars or Venus or whatever. Well, when they do that, we need to kind of strip apart what is sent up to us and just get the planet part. And that's what we're going to do with this last little bit, scrub message. And that's basically just going to do a little slice, find the data they sent, and then kind of trim it up and return ultimately the planet. So anything to add to that one on, Bob?
Nope. Makes sense.
Okay.
Just have to call that thing now somewhere.
Yeah, we got to call that thing. So kind of the last thing is, they want us to come in and we have this message that's going to be returned. We're going to change this to a let, because we're going to actually manipulate it. Yep. Right now, as you saw earlier, it just echoes what the user typed, but we don't want that. We actually want to grab and call these functions that we just did.
Perfect.
So Bob, just real quick, walk us through what do we got going here?
Yeah, well, it's gonna scrub the message, and what that's really doing is removing that @mention, which comes in looking HTML-ish, actually, the little @ inside of SGML brackets. Anybody remember what SGML is? And then it's going to process that authenticated request and walk through all that code that you just showed to construct the response.
Exactly. Okay, so now we have a way to get the data from the user, kind of split it apart to get the planet, find the planet from the planet file, feed that into the card, and then we're going to return that particular message. And you'll see that right down here. Basically just converts it into this JSON.stringify call and returns that back. So I think we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, Bob, we could do a gulp serve, but we should probably hold off on that, right?
Yeah, probably. And this is actually, I bet what you're going to do now is run a tool called ngrok. Is that right?
Yeah. So do you want to, while I'm starting this up, do you want to tell us a little bit about what ngrok is?
I do, and I want to also answer Kevin S.'s question about at the same time, because it's actually super relevant to this moment.
Okay.
So Kevin asked, how do outgoing webhooks interact with firewalls? Can we reach servers internal to the enterprise? And the answer is, well, Teams is a cloud-based service. So these requests are going to come from the cloud. So you're going to have to get those messages in to your service somehow. There's no magic here. So that either means a reverse proxy, a hole in the firewall, some kind of a tunnel, deploy your service to the cloud as well. There's all kinds of ways to integrate an Azure service, for instance, with your on-premises network. That's, so it's all secure. So there's lots of ways of doing it, but it is going to have to receive a connection from the internet. And that's what we're doing now, because not only does this affect you when you're deploying on-prem, it's also going to affect Dan right now. He's deploying on his local computer. So what you're looking at right now is a screen from ngrok, or it's the next thing in the instructions here. And you can see there are these little forwarding setups here. So it's going to take this ngrok URL, which is dynamically generated, and you can get a fixed address if you pay for their service, which I find worth it because I do a lot of Teams development. Your mileage may vary. And anything that comes in off of that public address is going to get relayed to localhost :3007. Now, fortunately, Dan didn't have to walk the plank. He did a great job of securing his service. So those messages are only going to go to that one port, and then they're going to be validated. So I think we're safe opening this up on the internet.
Yeah. Excellent. Great. I'm glad that question tied in. Good question. And great answer there. And
keep on coming with the questions. And yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, before we still need to start our server, folks, and we're going to come back to that and do it. But remember that we need this security token.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be adding this right into our environment file right here. Mm-hmm. So we'll come back and do that in a moment. Now, the next thing it wants us to do then is we need to go into Teams. Now, I'm just logged into my developer tenant, and they're going to have you do kind of a long-winded way to get to what we're going to show you. Let me just show you that really quick, and then, Bob, you can walk us through maybe a quicker way. But you can hit plus here, manage apps. That kind of gets us down to here. And then at the very bottom, it's actually kind of hard to see here, but it says create an outgoing webhook. Now, there is another option, though, right, Bob?
Yeah, if you just click on the three dots to the right of the team name, click manage team, and then it's under apps. So that kind of brings you to the same screen with a couple of fewer clicks.
Yep. So the next thing it wants us to do, and this name is really important here, is give it a name of planet, if I spell it right, details, and then the callback URL. Now, this URL is, just as a review, this is actually my ngrok URL right there. And that's going to change every time you start ngrok up, unless you get a pro one, I guess. But since I'm using the default here, we're going to put that. I'm going to paste it one more time just to make sure. And then we need to add API/webhook.
Right.
All
Which
right,
is
we'll do that
same
and then
path we saw before.
My first webhook or something like that. Now, Bob, you could upload, I don't know, maybe a picture of a parrot on you or something like that with your,
something like this, maybe. Arr. There you go.
But we're not going to do that today.
Okay.
So we're going to hit create here, and this is the magic moment, folks, where you either walk the plank or not. This is the security token. So we're going to copy this to the clipboard. I'm going to go on back, and right there in the security token, I'm going to paste that. And this is in a .env file that YoTeams is going to have for you. All right. So I think we're ready to start up the server, Bob.
All right.
Should we try it?
Drum roll.
All right. We'll do gulp serve, and we'll hope that this actually comes back reasonably fast. Now, while it's doing that, let's go on back to here. We had our token, so we should be good there.
Yep.
We'll close it. And then what I'm going to do is I just have a channel here that was created called Outgoing Web Hook, to be very obvious. And we could start a new conversation. And then once this is ready, we're going to mention planet details. So if we come on down, they're going to have you actually type @planet details Venus, but you could kind of type whatever you want. And okay, nope, we're still good. We're still good. Yeah, Bob,
those
real quick.
Rules,
Let's mention this real quick because it scares you at first, right?
Yeah, they've got every lint rule you could. One trailing space, bad programmer, cut it out.
That's right.
Don't do that. Trailing space. Oh no. Ah.
The first time I saw that, I literally went, "Oh my gosh! I just copy and pasted. How can I mess it up?" And
how can I mess it up that bad, right? So yeah,
no.
you can, and then plus they're shown in red, so you think they're worse than they are. So just look at the errors, and fix them up at some point. But
yeah, as long as you get down to here, you should be good.
Yep.
All right. So last step, let's try it out, Bob. So @planet. There it is.
Ooh, nice.
What planet you want to do?
I think Mars is good. I like
Mars.
Yeah.
We'll hit enter, and if all these stars are aligned, no pun intended, folks.
Ooh, look at that.
Oh, look at that. There's our card.
And the picture worked before, so I don't know what's going on. But
all right.
Mars
that is our
first
exercise. Let's switch on back here, folks, and let's do a quick review, Bob, on questions.
Sure. In fact, we have a couple questions from the audience. Let me just kind of go down real quick. Do we need a premium subscription for this? Asks Louis. I don't know all the licenses, and the M3 that you mentioned, I'm not familiar with. I'm not a licensing person. As far as I know, this works in every edition. I've never seen anything indicating that this is a premium feature. I don't know. I'm going to have to check, or someone will have to get back on the question about audit reports. Are webhook events tracked in an audit report? I will say that the messages, they're putting messages into a team. So I think that's probably going to be the answer, is that you may not see that it was specifically a webhook, but you're going to have that conversation history that will be discoverable. So let's go ahead and there's some more questions coming up, but let's go ahead and do this first question. Users can trigger the outgoing webhook by which of the following 3 ways? What do you think, Dan?
Well, we talked about in A there, ... more options. I don't think we really went into that one much.
No.
Okay, selecting the webhooks icon. I don't think we did. We did talk about an icon, but we didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, no, we didn't do it.
This one's easier. It's C.
Right? Yep, sure enough. And most of the studio audience actually, they're not in the studio, but most of the worldwide audience got that one right. So that's good.
Excellent. All right, next one. What is the significance of the HMAC, the HMAC token with outgoing webhooks? Give everybody a sec to look at that.
Yeah, while they're looking, I'll answer a couple other quick questions. Could the returned adaptive card include actions? Universal model, I don't know if that's in there yet, but it can absolutely include actions.
It can do actions, yeah.
Depending on what they are. So you can, some of the bot actions aren't there because you don't have an actual bot, but you could launch a web page. You could, reveal and hide parts of the card. In fact, I think that might be in one of the samples. So, and can we put the security token in Key Vault? Yes, I would absolutely recommend putting that security token in Key Vault or somewhere much, much safer than hard coding. This is just a lab exercise.
That's right.
So what about this one though?
So what's the significance? And this one's a little trickier. You kind of have to read through it a little bit here. But first off, use the security token in the response. No, we're not doing that.
This is tricky.
Message is sent.
Really similar.
Yeah. Okay, in the authorization header, I accidentally jumped it. My bad, sorry.
Oops.
Let's go back. There we go.
I give away there. Yeah, a little bit of a tell. Give some people a chance not to walk the plank. Right now, 45%, 50% of the audience is going to walk the plank. because they don't know
I'll
how
give you
to.
a hint, folks. There is a hashed value. And that would be your hint here, because B and C are pretty close. But the
This
answer,
is a tricky one because the answers are so similar, right?
yeah, they're kind of tricky on that one.
But it's good to have a challenge. So there you go.
All right. Well, that is our first exercise, folks. Bob, you want to go into our next one on incoming?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me grab the screen again here. And what I'm going to talk about now is the opposite of outgoing webhooks, which are aptly called incoming webhooks, incoming to teams. This is incredibly useful. I have to say, I worked with a partner who was moving from a competitive, a different collaboration system, and they had wired it into their whole operation. And it turned out that these incoming webhooks replaced the majority of what they were doing. So this means that your external app is sending a message, a simple HTTP post over to Teams, and it will show up in a Teams channel. The beauty of it is that you could do this with one line of script, curl command, right? You could do this with PowerShell. Any environment where you can send an HTTP request. Somebody, oh, sorry, Brent, can't swim. All right, well, we were just kidding around about the walking the plank part. You can do you can make up for it in the lab. But anyway, how incoming webhooks work. So the first thing is that, again, this is a one-off. If you want one that you can install on many teams and channels and have a whole configuration experience, you're going to want to wait till the next section, which is connectors. This is like the mini version, the sort of the scallywag version. So how incoming webhooks work, a user has to register this in a Teams channel. There's no way to automate it at this time. So a person goes and registers it. They get back a URL, which again contains a security token. So write that in your key vault or your most secure napkin or wherever, because anybody with that URL is going to be able to send messages into that Teams channel. And then all you have to do is send a post message. Like I said, this could just be one line of script, and that's a really handy place to use it, right? You've got an application, maybe there's some scripts running, DevOps, whatever, and at some point you just send a little progress report off to the team with one line, with one curl command. So Dan, I think you've got another demo teed up on this one, right?
I do. Let me go ahead and share that with everybody. Now, this one's kind of like, look, Mom, no code, because we don't really have to write any code, actually. So if we go to Unit 5 of this particular module in the learning area, we can register a new incoming webhook. Now, again, they kind of have us go through what I think is a little bit of a long-winded way, but we'll go ahead and show you. So on this one, I'm going to have this on a channel. We'll call this incoming webhook. And you'll notice they want you to hit the plus here. And then from here, manage apps. Now, we just showed you there's another way you can always get to manage apps, though. But I'll go ahead and we'll kind of do our thing here. Now, moving on down, once we hit manage apps, they're going to have this more apps button. So go ahead and click on that. And now, Bob, I need to select this incoming webhook, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this, again, may have changed since the lab was written, because I'm pretty sure this is automatically installed into every team. But so what we're doing here is adding this into a team. It doesn't hurt to do it, but I think you'll find that the incoming webhook is already in every team. That's
right. So we'll go ahead and do this, and I'm going to put this in Contoso, and then it's kind of up to you where you want to put it. We can come on in and do Contoso like incoming webhooks, since, hey, that's what we're talking about. And we can set up, now notice the name here, Bob, set up connector. Hey, that might be a segue to the next thing you're going to cover.
Well, it is. And I think what's going on here is that don't tell anybody. Incoming webhooks are just a connector. It's like a first party connector application that's just really extra flexible, but it's not really, they're really kind of the same.
That's exactly right. So, all right. Now, once we've done this, we need to give it a name here. So we're going to go ahead and do what they say. We're going to do dwarf, planet, details, not swarf. Let me try that again.
I hate that.
Swarf, that reminds me of Smurfs or something like that. I
Oh
don't know.
no. Blue Planet.
All right. And then we could upload an image. You probably would want to normally,
Sure.
but hey, in the interest of time, we're going to hit create here. And this is going to give us a magical URL. So we'll give this a sec. And there we go. Now, Bob, what's up with this URL? Because it's actually a lot longer, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some special sauce in there that actually has security information in it. So sometimes security is kind of all encoded into one thing. So that's what's going on here. It's secure if you store that URL really carefully somewhere. And anybody with that URL can send a message to your team. So you can weigh how dangerous that is depending on your situation.
That's right.
Honestly, a lot of times I see it in scripts. It'll be in some backend script somewhere, and people put it in there, and I guess they feel that that's safe because the worst thing that could happen is somebody could send in a notification.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we're configured. So I can actually go back and manage.
And yeah, that's a question just flashed by on that, and I think somebody else is fielding it. But yeah, that it is just the URL itself has a long string of characters that are the security.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to close that.
Oh yeah, you don't, and it says there's just a public endpoint that you've got to provide to a third-party service. You don't necessarily have to provide it to a third-party service. Right? You can put it somewhere else. Here's a hint. Try an Azure Function Proxy. Azure Function Proxy would be a great way to hide the webhook inside of a very, very, very inexpensive part of Azure. And, people can call. You could even authenticate the call coming in with just a checkbox in Azure.
Yeah. Now, let's go through that real quick.
And by the way, that would also let you change the webhook inside the Azure proxy if somehow it ended up in the hands of an unscrupulous party, which is
that's right.
Quoting also from Vinay. Vinay, this is a great question, by the way. Thank you so much.
So what Bob was just going through, we're going to kind of do, but we're going to call it directly. Now, what Bob's saying is if you would have put this like in an Azure Function Proxy, and there's even other options like API management in Azure.
Oh, sure.
You could do that too. Then you could actually call a URL that is just a general kind of Azure Functions type one or API one. Now, we're not going to do that in this case. They're going to have us go to Postman. If you haven't used Postman before, it's an HTTP caller. It's like curl or CURL or however you like to say it. Mm-hmm. And we're actually going to use this to post a message into Teams here. Now, you'll notice it says I've already set up the connection. So I think we're pretty good there. Now it's going to have us go to this Postman, which I've already done, and do a few things. Now, let me walk you through those just real quick. So we're going to set, first off, a content type header to application JSON, and I'll show you where that's done. And then we're going to add some JSON into the body of the raw body, they call it. And then basically we're going to post the message in, and we're going to send this card to Teams. So if we go over to Postman here, you'll notice first off, I have a post. I have that URL that they gave us, and that has that token in it. So we're calling it directly in this case. And then if I go to headers, you'll see I've added content type application JSON, and I've set the raw body to this card here that has the details. Now, this is kind of a hard-coded example of a card. So let's go ahead and hit send. And then hopefully we'll just get back a 1. That's perfect. That should be good. Go back to Teams, and there we go. Now, in this case, obviously at work, you're not going to be sending dwarf planets, but you probably do have things like an order just came in. Or you could even send in build information from like a CI/CD build process in Azure DevOps or GitHub or something like that if you want. Lots of use cases for this. It's, as Bob kind of mentioned this earlier, this is a really, really useful one to know about when you have those external systems and want to get data in. All right. So anything to add to that, Bob, before we go to the Q&A here?
No, let's go for it.
All right. So moving on then. let's talk about incoming webhooks.
And
So question number 1, what options can a developer use when sending a message to an incoming webhook?
Well, let's see. They could use a web service that sends a message, or they could, let's see, A and B are pretty similar, right?
They're pretty close, aren't they?
Yeah, card, markdown, or HTML. I don't remember seeing anything about HTML.
Nope.
And
that would be the giveaway.
And we know that cards are supported, so C can't be right because we just got, we just saw one. Yeah, we just did it. So
otherwise,
I'm going to go with B
hard coded and faked, right, Bob?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
So survey says, it's going to be B because you can do text. Obviously, you can do a card. Markdown was mentioned earlier, but HTML is not one of those options.
Yep.
All right. Take us through the next one here, Bob.
All right. And then we got to, Glenn's telling us we got to watch our time. So we got
30 minutes, it looks like.
Yeah, yep. I think we'll be good. So let's see. How can web developers submit a message to an incoming webhook? And give you a second to look these over. Let's see. After registering the incoming webhook, we submit the message in the body of an HTTP post. Sounds reasonable.
Okay, that's reasonable.
I think that's what we did. After registering it, we submit it with a get. It seems kind of weird. No, you can't get things and can't push things out with a get. After registering, we submit it with a post and include the HMAC. I think
we didn't do anything with the header.
That was the old one. That was the outgoing web. So, yep, sure enough. There we go.
Right.
All right. So now I guess we're going to dig into what's next. The connectors.
The connectors. I'll introduce them and let you do the demo on these ones.
All righty. Let's go. Sounds
excellent.
Good.
So we just talked about how we can get data into Teams with an incoming webhook, and it's super cool, way to do that actually. But you also saw that, like as a user, you would have to know how to go in, click, add the URL, and it's pretty manual. You saw. With connectors, it's going to be a very similar approach to what you want to accomplish. You can get data into Teams, but these can actually be installed. And so this provides a much more smooth experience for users working, for instance, in a channel where we want to get this data in. This is also going to provide a configuration page, and Bob's going to walk us through this. So, for instance, if you were trying to connect to stock quotes, well, you'd probably want to supply the quote or quotes that you want to watch. If you want to supply maybe a sales order you want to watch, you'd probably need a page where you could supply the ID for that sale order. Well, with connectors, we can do this. And Bob mentioned earlier, you can also do these with Microsoft Outlook as well. We're not going to go into that here, but that's another option. So from a high level, these work the same as what we have with incoming webhooks, but we have a much more formal process that Bob will walk us through here in just a moment for actually doing this. And here's the general process. So first off, a developer can register a connector. And let's dive into this here. So we're going to create a web page for the connector. We're going to register that connector in a developer dashboard. Now, this would be something we didn't do previously, and Bob will kind of walk us through this. And then that's going to give us a connector ID that we're going to need. Now, once we have that, we can configure the connector in a channel. So Teams can actually, we're going in to configure this, add it. We can now get, whether it's a stock quote page, or in this case, it's going to be select a favorite color. And this will allow us to, in essence, subscribe to very specific things. I don't want all the messages coming from the external system. I want to filter that down to just the blue messages or the orange messages or a certain stock quote.
Right.
Now, we're going to be using the Teams JavaScript SDK to obtain a webhook URL. And then we're going to be using that to save that information. This is something we will have to do, and Bob will talk more about this. Now, once this has all been hooked up, the app can then send the notification, and we're kind of ready to go here. So, Bob, you want to walk us through how can we actually do all this database part here and the rest of it?
I would love to. Let's jump into demo mode again. And So I'm going to start by just bringing us over to the exercise. So this is Unit 7 now of the Learn module. And this one actually changes a little bit. So this one has been a little bit more affected by changes in the cloud services since this was written. As I mentioned, watch this space because I know this is going to be updated soon. But right now, the first step is to create a Teams app, and we actually end up needing some information to do that. Which is mainly the ngrok URL. I'm going to go slightly out of order on this in order to kind of accommodate some of the little changes. So let's just kind of take a look at that. Basically, we're going to install the tools, run Yo Teams, modify the code, but we're going to end up starting ngrok at the beginning instead of the end, so that we can get that URL. So here we go. I'm just going to run ngrok. In this case, I went ahead and used my registered, so I'm paying for ngrok, so I get to register my own URL that doesn't change all the time. But you can easily do this with the free service. And so now I've got a web visible, internet public host name. I'm just going to make note of that in my favorite notepad tool. And then I'm going to pop in and we'll go kind of pick up where the instructions do and go into the connectors dashboard. And that's aka.ms/connectors dashboard. And I'll just kind of fill this in. And this is where the connector kind of gets registered centrally. And you don't need all these fields, but a lot of them you do. And so configuration page, it doesn't actually use it in the case of a Teams app. It's going to pull that out of the Teams manifest. But what has changed since the lab was written, and this is the important thing, is that it won't work unless you put the ngrok URL or whatever the public URL host name into valid domains. So apparently this previously worked, but right now, if it just, Dan, do you remember that? Didn't this happen to both of us?
Yeah.
What was the developer experience if you didn't have this?
Let's just say first off, it didn't work without that, like you said, and then we went and added it, but it took a little bit of time for it to actually catch up, apparently.
Yeah.
So there must be a behind the scenes cache or something that has
exactly. So we had to. So this is worth kind of getting right the first time, because otherwise, frankly, if it doesn't work and you haven't used this connector anywhere else, I would suggest deleting and making a new connector, because it could take like up to a half an hour to update. And if you don't have the valid domain, it will just, when you go to bring up the configuration page, it just spins and spins, and it just never. And then there's errors in the console, but just put it in there and life will be good, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to accept the T's and C's, and there we go. Now, this handy user interface is giving me the essential connector ID. Of course, since we're all real developers here, we don't mind pulling it out of the URL. So we're going to get the connector ID from the URL where it has conveniently been placed for us.
Going hardcore here, Bob.
Yeah, I know, we're going hardcore here. Well, I'm sure there's a story behind it, but it's this is all explained quite clearly in the document, in the lab documentation. All right. So now let's go back to the exercise again, and I'm going to go down a little bit further, and we're going to work on the Teams manifest next. No, we're not. We're going to run Yo Teams. We're going to actually create the Teams app. So let's go ahead and do that. And so here I am. I'll just bring up a command line, and I'll type Yo Teams. And again, similar to Dan, through the wonder of video, I'm going to speed this up a little bit because, well, my typing notwithstanding, but the NPM part can take like 10 minutes to run. So I'll go ahead and I'm just putting in what they tell me to in the instructions. This part you might get slightly confused if you haven't used Yeoman. This is part of Yeoman, actually. What features do you want? You use the space bar to select and deselect these, and the arrow keys to move up and down the list. So I'm going to click space to unselect a tab, down arrow to connector, and then hit space to turn on the connector. And I'll just go ahead and fill all these in. Now, I was going to say I want a new connector, and it's interesting. You can fill these two questions in here or later in the environment file. So the instructions, I think, say to do it here. I'll show you both so you can see it. But there's the connector ID, and there's the name of my connector, and then this is the part that I sped up because it can take quite a while. Yeah, exactly. This took like 10 minutes, and I put a big. It's still taking a while. All right, and there we go. We're done. Yay! So now we've got our app. So let's scroll down in the instructions a little bit more. We're going to go into the Teams app manifest. Now, we haven't really talked about manifests before. Teams applications, if you're new to developing for Teams, they're always made up of things that are just kind of common on the internet. Web services, you've seen us talking webhooks, web pages. The configuration page is just going to be an ordinary web page. And the manifest.json file is what tells Teams, it gets zipped up with the application's icons and installed into Teams as an application package. So that's the way, whether it's coming from the Teams store or it's something you're uploading for your tenant or even just uploading into an individual team, your app is just a zip file with this manifest.json in it. And inside of here is where we're going to associate this connector and the connector ID with this application. So when an end user or an admin installs this application, this connector is going to be right at their fingertips from right there. There's also a couple of empty array properties that are generated by default, and Teams doesn't like having empty arrays for these things, so it's going to have us remove those. And so let's go ahead and just do that step next. So I'm just going to come in and bring up Visual Studio Code. And inside of the code, you'll see that I have my environment file. So there's that connector ID that I pasted in with Yo Teams. I'm going to actually complete the picture now by pasting my ngrok URL in there too. This is going to get included in the manifest as well as used in the code. So it's great that they've consolidated everything into one environment file here. Thank you, Victor. Tip of the pirate hat. Anyway, I don't think they tipped hats, did they? Anyway, manifest.json is here. So you'll see it's just a JSON file. And there are these little kind of data binding expressions or tokens in here that are going to pull stuff out of that environment file. So if I scroll down, you'll see, yeah, here's where it's going to get a few unused arrays. So we don't have any tabs or bots. We don't have any compose extensions. We'll get rid of those. Notice that what's left, it's referencing stuff, the connector ID and the host name from that environment file right there. Then, and I'm not sure if it's mentioned in the instructions, so I'll point it out now. You need to run another gulp command, gulp manifest, to generate that app manifest. You could also just use any zip utility that you want. All right. So now we're going to come in here and look at the configuration page. And again, the world is dynamic and constantly changing. As it turns out, this is going to have us go in and change the code. The code that gets generated by Yo Teams has changed significantly since this lab was written. So it used to use React classes, and now it uses React hooks. So, they're telling us to go into, oh, wait a minute. I think, you know what? I'm starting to see some new instructions. Maybe they did actually.
They must have just updated part of this. Yeah,
they must have just updated this since we practiced the other day. Because, okay, well, there we go. So I actually didn't make this code change to filter, so I'm not sure if that's really necessary. But let me show you what I did do. So this is I'm just going to walk you through the config page just so you understand how it works, right? We're going to only configure a color, and there's blue and orange are the only two colors we'll support. There they are, right? And then when we get our app context, Teams has a JavaScript SDK called Microsoft Teams. That's what we're using here. When we get a Teams context, which is initiated a little bit further down in the code. We're going to go ahead and run this code here. And what it's going to do is register an on-save handler. So when you see me run the demo, you'll see that there's a little form that I'm going to fill out, and then there's a save button. So this anonymous function that starts that gets passed into register on save handler is going to run when somebody clicks that save button. And then we're going to go ahead and do a post over to our own web service when that happens to save the configuration management information in our own database. That database, by the way, is just a JSON file that's been cleverly kind of put in here. So it's here under connectors.json. So it's kind of interesting. If you want to kind of reset the demo, you can just delete this file. If you want to see what's really going on, you can just come in here and take a look and see it's storing this information about each connector when it gets configured, including the webhook URL. So it starts to look a little bit like those incoming webhooks, right? So yep. Now that's what this code is doing. It's also going to it's kind of odd. It's going to set settings. So it's going to push some information into Teams, and then it's going to immediately get the settings back. And the reason for that is because we want to get this webhook URL, which is actually assigned by Teams, and save that away in the database. Then finally, when somebody selects a color, when they actually go into the UI and select a color, if that color is defined, they picked one of the choices, then we're going to set the validity state again with that JavaScript SDK. What that does is if you set validity state as true, it lights up the save button and lets them save the configuration. If you set it to false, it grays out the save button and you can't save it. Now, just for fun, I actually added a little bit more to this lab. The lab is good. It just kind of shows a fairly generic connector message coming out. A common way to do this, though, in kind of real life would be to look at the configuration, the colors in this case, and send out messages based on the way the user configured it. So Dan gave some great examples, like a stock quote or an order number, right? And we're going to go ahead and look at that information here. And so I'll point you at the end to this code. This is completely optional, right? But basically what it's going to do is when we call, here's the connect where we're going to save the state. And here's the ping where we're going to actually kick the connector lab to send a connection information or send a notification in. And what it's going to do is it's going to filter. And you can even see I noted where the lines would get added here. It's going to find the connections that match a color that's passed into us. And then it's only going to send these messages out to people whose connector color matches. So this would be kind of like Dan's example where you maybe configured a certain stock quote. We're not going to blast every stock out to every user. That would drive them crazy. And we'll include a little color swatch and things like that. So now let's go back to the instructions and just go ahead and start the project. And again, we've already registered the connector. We needed the connection ID to do that. And so, I'm not sure how that would work with us registering it after we did the manifest. So you may have to change the order of these steps here, which makes me wonder, maybe it's not completely updated yet. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and update the project. Maybe I missed something on that, but that's the way I think it works. And we'll update the package. Oh, I see. They're doing the package after. So they've changed the order of things. I'm sure this probably works. Let me just show you how I made it work anyway. Oops.
Yeah, and while Bob's doing this, just so you know, we mentioned that these are being updated, and it looks like they're partially updated. And
yeah, or they may be fully updated. And
today.
I apologize. We thought it would happen next week.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize it was. I literally checked these last night. So what timing, right?
Hey,
so I'm
it's
going to
all
go ahead
live,
and type
folks.
gulp serve, and I get one of these little lint errors, but I can ignore that. Now I'm running on 3007. Got my ngrok. I already started that up. I'm just going to go into our friend Microsoft Teams, and I'm going to install that application package. So I'll upload this and just go into the package folder underneath of your project folder, and you'll see the spinning circle at the top. And bang, there it is, my first Teams connector. Hey, a fun trivia question, Dan. Who or what is that little figure in the orange rectangle there?
I just know it from the PnP site, but I don't know his or her name.
Yeah, well, actually, nobody really knows. We don't ask personal questions about gender, but you know, that is Parker, gender neutral name, by the way. That is Parker, the PnP porcupine. So, and people aren't even very prickly over there. So just saying, but this is kind of a cool thing to know. Yo Teams is produced also under the PnP. Patterns and Practices is a great place to get tools and samples and all kinds of things like that. So you would go to pnp.github.io to find all that information. So I'm just going to come in here and grab my connector and install this application, just like Dan did with the incoming connector. However, this one obviously is not going to be pre-installed because I just wrote it, or well, the generator and the lab and everything just wrote it. So I'll go in and search for this thing. There it is. And when I click configure, what's going to happen is my configuration page is going to light up. Now, what you're seeing is at the top where it says my first Teams connector and at the bottom where it says cancel save, those are Teams. What's in the middle where it says configure your connector, those are the configuration page running in an iframe. So I'm going to go ahead and make a blue connector and put that in here. And by the way, Victor says there's a pro tip where you can have multiple env files for staging and
that's
production
nice
stuff like that. That's a really nice feature. And I'm going to just go in and configure another one of these just to kind of make the point that in practice, you're not going to send all the messages or all notifications to every connector. I understand that that's what gets generated because they don't know how it's going to, you know, it makes it very flexible to apply to different scenarios. But in this case, I made up a little scenario for us with orange and blue. So the final step is to go into Postman, create a new request pointing to your URL /connector/ping. And I'm just going to send this message into the blue channel where it was accepted. And let's make another one for orange. So, Vesa, I'm thinking of you. I know it's your favorite color. So, orange channel. And here we go. And now you can see, yep, it sent the message into orange. It sent the blue message into blue. And so we're good. That's it. Ta-da. It worked.
Ta-da. Nice.
All right. So, let's see. Is it a quick question, and then maybe we go into the knowledge check, or should we? Let's start the knowledge check because of the delay. So the very first question is, how do Office 365 connectors differ from incoming webhooks? What do you think, Dan?
Well, they're definitely smoother, less manual configuration.
Yeah. Yep, that's true. While people are thinking about that, I'm going to take a shot at Augustin G's question. Is it possible for a webhook or connector to interact with a pre-existing Teams app? And the answer is, well, you would have to, if you own that pre-existing Teams app and you can change the code, then you could have it call that webhook URL to send notifications in. However, if you have, you know, it's got to be, that call has to be initiated from somewhere. So there's no easy way. You know, if it's somebody else's app and you don't have the code and you can't change anything about the app, then you know, go talk to the people who developed the app, because
that's right.
We can't make webhook calls get as much as Captain Webhook would like it.
That's right.
We can't get
webhook
calls to come out of thin air. So yeah, we're getting lots of answers here. This is obviously a tough one because we started
off with a hint, folks.
50-50 on this.
They do have configuration pages.
Ah, yes, good point. we do. So I think
Whereas
the
incoming,
answer is revealing itself. Yep. And I can see that people are getting this one right. So that's great. And then let's go to the next one, which is, what do you think of this question, Dan?
what is required to implement an Office 365 connector for Microsoft Teams? Well, I remember a dashboard, Bob, so that one might be pretty easy.
Right there. Yeah. Well, we'll give people a minute to think about this. Someone asked, what if we had to approve or reject a request? And I think what you're probably thinking here is, we've got the connector. Maybe the connector sends a card in with a request, with an approval request in it, and we want to be able to approve it or reject it. That would work much better with a bot, where you can actually have an interaction back and forth. You could absolutely write a bot like that. If you wanted to do it with a connector, you kind of could, but I think you would be left with something like, so one of the adaptive card actions that does work in a connector is launch a web page. So you could hack this by having a button where they push it and it launches a web page where it asks them to approve. But there's really no way to otherwise capture information here, and there's also no way to really authenticate the user. I mean, the user's in the team where the connector was installed, but you really don't know anything else about them. So, approval to me says somebody important gets to decide. And if any old person comes along, they can't do it. So again, you could, if you had a little web page that opens up, you could authenticate them and check their authorization to approve in your web page, but kind of beyond the connector, right? And looks like it's unanimous. Dude, it is totally unanimous. 100%.
That was one of the easier ones if you knew.
Went for the answer A here. So
excellent.
So I think that's about it. Dan,
that's it.
Got anything to sum things up in the last few minutes?
Let's just wrap up real quick. Yeah. So if Bob is in Teams and Bob wants to type at name of your webhook, Bob could do that, right? You could have a web service that Bob could call. That would be an outgoing webhook from the perspective of Teams again. And then we talked about really two ways to get data into your app, and that'd be incoming webhook. And that's a little more, I'll call it primitive from the configuration side. But if you want to be a little more robust, give them that configuration page, like the orange and blue that Bob picked. Then you could do a connector. And that's really what the goal of this is. And for those, if you want to move on to the next one there, Bob, I think the nice thing here is you can go through this on your own, play with it, and there's a lot of neat things you can do.
Absolutely. And so please go ahead and check this out, aka.ms/CON066. And you can actually get this same hands-on experience with webhooks and connectors. Also, we'd love it if you joined weekly on Learn TV. And I'm hoping that Dan and I get to come back on someday. It was really fun to do this. But these programs come out every week on Learn Live TV. And as they say, this is an all, right? So you can keep on doing this. This airs every Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific. And so mark your calendar, and every week they go over another fun Learn module. So there we go. Oh, you know what? I wanted to sneak in one more question. So Wenbo, I apologize if I didn't get your name right, asks, if the organization restricts sideloading, how do you test your developed app? And this is absolutely one of my favorite things right here, because it turns out that you can get a free developer account. Let me just pull this up. 365 developer.
We got about 1 minute.
Seconds. Got a minute. It's not going to take long. So I just went in here to Bing and looked for a Microsoft 365 developer program. It works on all, and here it is. You can come in here, developer.microsoft.com. I don't remember the shortened link. You can come in here and join this, and you'll get a free developer account where you are the admin. So that's the way to test it. Don't test it in your production tenant where you're going to be wondering, what's going to work, what's not going to work. Am I going to break something for a user or send them test messages, stuff like that.
And
So-
that's exactly what Bob and I were doing, by the way, live here, was using a developer tenant. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're probably wrapped
we are
up.
wrapped up.
Just
Yeah.
about. So thanks
Cool.
everyone for joining. It was great. Please follow us on Twitter. And we'll see you later. Got to get as much mileage out of this little guy as I can.
Nice.
And we'll probably are off by now. 5 minutes left. We still